The morning sun streamed through the crystal windows of the Blackwood mansion, casting golden light across marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. Blackwood stood at the foot of the grand staircase, her designer heels clicking against the polished stone as she paced back and forth. Her perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her silk dress, and worry lines creased her usually flawless face. "She hasn't eaten anything in 3 days," whispered to her husband, Richard, who sat hunched over his mahogany desk in the adjoining study. His silver hair caught the light as he looked up from his papers, his weathered face showing the strain of recent weeks. Richard Blackwood had built his fortune from nothing, transforming a small construction company into a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions. He owned shopping centers, office buildings, and luxury apartments across the state. Money had never been a problem for the Blackwood family, but money couldn't solve every problem. Upstairs in the master bedroom, their 18-month-old daughter Isabella lay in her custom-made crib, her tiny body wrapped in the finest silk blankets money could buy. The child's once chubby cheeks had grown hollow, and her bright blue eyes had lost their sparkle. She turned away from every bottle, every spoonful of food, every attempt to nourish her small body. The family had consulted the best pediatricians in the country. Dr. Harrison from Children's Hospital had run countless tests. Doctor, the renowned infant specialist, had examined Isabella for hours. Every medical expert they contacted said the same thing: there was nothing physically wrong with the child. She was simply refusing to eat. Climbed the curved staircase slowly, her heart heavy with fear. She pushed open the nursery door and found Isabella lying quietly, staring at the ceiling with unfocused eyes. The room was a masterpiece of interior design, painted in soft pastels with hand-carved furniture imported from Italy. Stuffed animals from the finest toy stores lined the shelves, and a mobile made of genuine crystals hung above the crib, casting tiny rainbows across the walls. "Please, sweetheart," whispered, picking up her daughter. Isabella felt lighter than she had just days before, and chest tightened with panic. "Mommy has your favorite formula, the one that costs more than most people make in a week." She had tried everything: organic formula, imported baby food, specially prepared meals from the family's personal chef. Nothing worked. Isabella would turn her head away or spit out whatever was offered. The child was wasting away despite being surrounded by luxury beyond most people's dreams. Richard entered the nursery, his footsteps heavy on the plush carpet. He had canceled 3 important business meetings that morning, something he had never done in his entire career. His empire demanded constant attention, but his daughter needed him more. "Doctor is coming this afternoon," he said quietly, settling into the rocking chair beside. "She's a specialist in infant feeding disorders, flies in from California to work with celebrities' children." Nodded but didn't look up from Isabella. "What if she can't help either? What if we lose her, Richard?" The possibility hung in the air like a dark cloud. They had everything money could buy: a mansion with 23 rooms, cars worth more than most houses, vacation homes in 3 countries. But they couldn't make their daughter eat. Down in the kitchen, Martinez was preparing lunch for the household staff. She had worked for the Blackwood family for 8 years, starting as a cleaning lady and gradually taking on more responsibilities. At 34, was a single mother herself, supporting her own family on the wages she earned from the wealthy household. Lived in a small apartment across town with her 6-month-old son, Carlos. Every morning, she kissed him goodbye and left him with her neighbor, Mrs., who watched several children while their mothers worked. Days were long and tiring, but she was grateful for steady employment with a family that treated their staff fairly. The Blackwoods paid well compared to other households in the area. She received health insurance, paid vacation time, and yearly bonuses that helped her family during difficult periods. Richard and were demanding employers, but never cruel or disrespectful. They understood that was a professional doing important work. As chopped vegetables for the staff meal, she could hear footsteps in the room above. The sound of crying, both from baby Isabella and from herself, drifted down through the ceiling. His heart ached for the family she served. Understood the desperation of a mother whose child wouldn't eat. When Carlos had been born, he had struggled with colic for months. There were nights when wondered if she was failing as a mother, if she was somehow inadequate to care for her son. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. But also understood something else. Sometimes children responded to different people in unexpected ways. She had seen it with her own extended family, where bobbies who fussed for their parents would calm instantly in the arms of an aunt or grandmother. Children could be mysterious in their preferences and needs. Appeared in the kitchen doorway, her designer dress wrinkled from holding Isabella. The child hung limply in her arms, and its eyes were red from crying. "Could you prepare some warm milk?" asked. Doctor suggested trying different temperatures. Maybe if it's exactly body temperature, Isabella might accept it. "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood," replied immediately. She set down her knife and moved to the professional-grade stove. "Should I use the organic milk from the specialty store?" "Yes, please, and sterilize everything twice. Doctor is coming soon, and I want to have tried every possibility before she arrives." Heated the milk with careful precision, testing the temperature multiple times to ensure it was exactly right. She had learned these skills caring for Carlos, understanding how particular bobbies could be about the smallest details. As she worked, watched pace the kitchen floor. The wealthy woman looked exhausted and defeated, her usual composure completely gone. Had seen handle million-dollar business deals with calm confidence, but motherhood had brought out a vulnerability that money couldn't protect. "Mrs. Blackwood," said gently, "would you like me to bring the milk upstairs for you?" "That's kind, but I should do it myself," replied. She took the warm bottle and headed back toward the staircase, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her fears. Returned to her vegetable preparation, but her mind remained focused on the family's crisis. She thought about her own son, Carlos, who was thriving and healthy. He was a good eater, always eager for his bottles, and the solid foods was beginning to introduce. The contrast between Carlos's robust health and Isabella's mysterious refusal to eat struck as particularly cruel. 30 minutes later, returned to the kitchen with the untouched bottle. Isabella had refused even to let it near her mouth, turning her head away and beginning to cry the moment the bottle appeared. "She knows what it is," said, her voice breaking slightly. "It's like she's decided to give up and we can't convince her otherwise." Wiped her hands on her apron and looked at with sympathy. "Mrs. Blackwood, sometimes bobbies go through phases. My cousin's daughter did something similar when she was about Isabella's age. It lasted 2 weeks, and then suddenly she started eating normally again." "But what if this isn't a phase?" asked. "What if we can't figure out what she needs? I've read about failure to thrive. Children can. They can just fade away if they don't get proper nutrition." The possibility was too frightening to speak aloud, but it hung between them in the quiet kitchen. Had heard the phrase before, failure to thrive. It described children who didn't grow and develop as expected, often without any clear medical cause. The thought that such a thing could happen to a child who had every advantage terrified both women. Doctor arrived that afternoon in a black sedan, carrying a leather medical bag and an air of professional confidence. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, known for her success with difficult feeding cases, and Richard met her at the front door, hope and desperation evident in their faces. "Tell me everything," Doctor said as they climbed the stairs to Isabella's nursery. "When did the refusal to eat begin? What was happening in the household at that time? Any changes in routine or environment?" Recounted the timeline carefully. Isabella had been a normal, healthy baby until 10 days ago. She had been eating well, gaining weight appropriately, and meeting all her developmental milestones. Then suddenly, without warning or apparent cause, she had simply stopped accepting food of any kind. Doctor examined Isabella thoroughly, checking her reflexes, looking in her mouth and throat, palpating her abdomen for any signs of discomfort or obstruction. The child lay quietly during the examination, neither crying nor responding to the doctor's gentle attempts to engage her attention. "Physically, she appears normal," Doctor concluded. "No signs of illness or injury. Her reflexes are appropriate for her age, but she's clearly losing weight and becoming dehydrated. We need to address this quickly." "We've tried everything," Richard said. "Different formulas, different bottles, different feeding positions, nothing works." Doctor nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes feeding refusal can be psychological. Has there been any trauma or significant change in her environment? New caregivers, moves, family stress?" And Richard exchanged glances. There had been some business pressures recently, a major deal that required Richard to work longer hours, some tension between them about their social calendar, but nothing that seemed significant enough to affect their daughter so dramatically. "We've been under some stress with business matters," Richard admitted, "but we've tried to keep that away from Isabella. She's had the same nanny, the same routine, the same everything. Doctor spent another hour with the family observing Isabella's behavior and watching Richard interact with their daughter. She took notes on everything: the child's responses, the parents' techniques, the general atmosphere of the household. "I'm going to recommend a multi-pronged approach," Doctor finally said. "First, we need to ensure Isabella doesn't become dangerously dehydrated. If she doesn't start taking fluids within 24 hours, we may need to consider hospitalization for IV fluids." The word hospitalization hit like a physical blow. She had never imagined that her daughter might need to be hospitalized for something as basic as eating. "Second," Doctor continued, "I want you to try some environmental changes. Sometimes bobbies respond to different settings, different people, different approaches. Have you considered having other caregivers attempt to feed her?" "Our nanny tried," said. "Mrs. Henderson has been with us since Isabella was born. She's very experienced." "What about other household staff? Sometimes children respond unexpectedly to people they see regularly, but who aren't their primary caregivers." Was finishing her kitchen duties when she overheard this conversation through the open doorway. She paused in her cleaning, considering the doctor's suggestion. Saw Isabella regularly when she cleaned the nursery and the family areas, but she had never attempted to feed the child. That was always handled by Richard or Mrs. Henderson. As Doctor prepared to leave, she gave Richard a detailed plan to follow. They were to attempt feeding every 2 hours using different approaches, different positions, different environments, different people. Everything was to be documented carefully so patterns could be identified. "The next 24 hours are critical," Doctor warned. "If Isabella doesn't begin taking some nutrition soon, we'll need to intervene more aggressively." After the doctor left, Richard sat in their living room, surrounded by luxury but feeling utterly helpless. The Persian rugs beneath their feet had cost more than most people's cars. The paintings on their walls were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but none of their wealth could solve the simple problem of getting their daughter to eat. "Should we call your mother?" Richard suggested. "Maybe she could fly in from Boston. Sometimes grandmothers have different techniques." Considered this but shook her head. "She wouldn't be here until tomorrow evening at the earliest. Doctor said we can't wait that long." They tried feeding Isabella again that evening, using a different room as Doctor had suggested. They moved to the sunroom, with its large windows and comfortable chairs. Hopping the change of scenery might help. But Isabella's response was the same. She turned away from the bottle and began to fuss the moment it came near her mouth. Was preparing to leave for the day when she encountered in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. The usually composed woman looked devastated, and's heart went out to her. "Mrs. Blackwood, are you all right?" asked gently. "She won't eat. Doctor says we might have to hospitalize her tomorrow if she doesn't start taking some nutrition. I don't know what else to try." Hesitated for a moment, then spoke carefully. "Mrs. Blackwood, Doctor mentioned trying different caregivers. Would you like me to attempt feeding her? I know I'm not trained as a nanny, but sometimes bobbies respond differently to different people." Looked at with surprise. In 8 years of employment, had rarely interacted directly with family members beyond professional duties. But the suggestion made sense, and they were running out of options. "Would you be willing to try?" asked hopefully. "I know it's not part of your regular duties, but—" "Of course," replied immediately. "Let me just call my neighbor to check on Carlos, and then I'll stay as long as you need." Called Mrs. to explain that she would be home late, then followed upstairs to Isabella's nursery. The child lay in her crib, awake but listless, her tiny body seeming to grow smaller each day. Prepared a fresh bottle while washed her hands thoroughly. As she dried them, thought about her own son and the instinctive techniques she had developed to soothe and feed him. Every mother learned different approaches, and perhaps Isabella needed something specific that hadn't been tried yet. Approached the crib slowly, speaking softly to Isabella in both English and Spanish. "Hola, hello, little princess. Are you going to try eating for tonight?" Isabella's eyes focused on his face with what seemed like mild curiosity. Gently picked up the child, nodding how light she felt, how fragile her small body had become. But there was still alertness in Isabella's eyes, still life and personality behind the refusal to eat. Settled into the rocking chair with Isabella cradled against her chest. She began to hum a soft lullaby that her own mother had sung to her, then later to Carlos. The melody was simple and repetitive, with a rhythm that matched a heartbeat. Watched from the doorway as rocked slowly, continuing to hum. There was something different about Sa's approach. She wasn't focused on the bottle or on getting Isabella to eat immediately. Instead, she seemed focused on connecting with the child, on creating a sense of calm and safety. After several minutes, reached for the bottle had prepared. But instead of offering it to Isabella immediately, she continued rocking and humming, holding the bottle where the child could see it, but without any pressure to accept it. Isabella's eyes moved to the bottle, then back to Sa's face, then to the bottle again. For the first time in days, she didn't immediately turn away from the sight of feeding equipment. Began to sing softly, a Spanish lullaby about a little bird who was learning to fly. Her voice was gentle and melodic, and Isabella seemed to relax further against Sa's chest. The child's breathing became deeper and more regular. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, brought the bottle closer to Isabella's mouth. She didn't try to force it or push it against the child's lips. Instead, she let Isabella investigate it at her own pace, continuing to sing and rock gently. Isabella's tiny hand reached up and touched the bottle. She examined it with her fingers, bringing it closer to her face. Held perfectly still, letting the child control the interaction completely. Then, to Sa's amazement, Isabella opened her mouth and allowed the nipple to touch her lips. She didn't drink immediately, but she didn't turn away either. Continued singing, her voice steady and soothing. Isabella took a tentative sip, then another. Her eyes remained focused on Sa's face as she began to drink more steadily, her small body relaxing further with each swallow. Watched in wonder as her daughter consumed more formula in those few minutes than she had in the previous 3 days combined. Tears of relief and gratitude streamed down Sa's face as she witnessed this small miracle. Continued rocking and singing until Isabella had finished nearly half the bottle, more than enough to address the immediate concern about dehydration. When the child's eyelids began to grow heavy, carefully placed the bottle aside and continued rocking, allowing Isabella to drift into peaceful sleep. Approached quietly as placed the sleeping child back in her crib. "How did you know?" whispered. "How did you know what she needed?" Smoothed Isabella's blanket gently before responding. "I didn't know, Mrs. Blackwood. Sometimes Bobbies just need to feel safe and loved. Maybe she needed to hear a different voice, a different rhythm. Or maybe she just needed someone who wasn't worried about making her eat." The explanation made perfect sense, too. For days, every interaction with Isabella had been focused on eating, on the urgent need to get nutrition into her small body. The pressure and anxiety surrounding feeding time might have made Isabella associate bottles and food with stress and fear. Gathered her things to leave but stopped her at the nursery door. "Would you be willing to try feeding her again tomorrow, and perhaps, would you consider staying overnight tonight? I know it's a lot to ask, but after what just happened." Thought about Carlo's waiting at home, about her own responsibilities. But she also thought about the relief in Sa's voice and the peaceful way Isabella had fallen asleep after eating. Sometimes life presented opportunities to make a real difference, and this seemed like one of those moments. Spent that night in the guest room next to Isabella's nursery, waking every few hours to check on the child and attempt feedings. Each time, she used the same gentle approach, rocking, singing, and allowing Isabella to set the pace. By morning, the little girl had consumed more formula than she had in the previous week combined. Found in the kitchen at dawn, preparing a fresh bottle with the same careful attention she gave to all her duties. The wealthy woman looked better than she had in days, finally having gotten a full night's sleep without constant worry about her daughter's condition. "How is she this morning?" asked, pouring herself coffee from the professional espresso machine that dominated one corner of the kitchen. "She took 4 ounces at 5 o'clock, reported, measuring formula with precise care. She seemed more alert, too, made eye contact and even smiled a little when I was singing to her." Relief flooded through Sa's body like warm sunshine. A smile from Isabella meant the child was feeling better, responding to care, engaging with the world again. It was the first smile they had seen from her in over a week. Richard appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair disheveled from sleep but his eyes bright with hope. "I heard voices. How did the night go?" Quickly filled him in on success with feeding Isabella. Richard listened with growing amazement, then sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs as the full impact of the situation settled over him. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You may have saved our daughter's life." felt uncomfortable with such dramatic praise. "Mr. Blackwood, I just tried a different approach. Sometimes Bobbies respond to change. It doesn't mean I did anything special." But Richard and both knew it was more than that. Had brought something to the situation that all their wealth and access to top medical specialists had not provided. A calm, intuitive understanding of what Isabella needed in that moment. Mrs. Henderson, the family's nanny, arrived at 8 o'clock as usual. She was a professional woman in her 50s with decades of experience caring for wealthy families' children. When she learned about's overnight success with feeding Isabella, her reaction was complex, part relief for the child's sake, part professional puzzlement about why her own efforts had failed. "I've been caring for children for 30 years, Mrs. Henderson said as they stood in the nursery watching rock Isabella. "I've never encountered a feeding refusal that resolved so quickly with a simple change of caregiver." Nodded, equally but too grateful to question the mechanism behind success. "Doctor said sometimes children respond unexpectedly to different people. Maybe Isabella just needed particular approach." Mrs. Henderson watched sing softly in Spanish while Isabella drank her morning bottle. The scene looked peaceful and natural, as if had been caring for the child for months rather than just one night. There was an ease in its movements, a confidence that came from some deep well of maternal instinct. "Perhaps," Mrs. Henderson said carefully, "it would be beneficial for to continue assisting with Isabella's care, at least until her eating habits are fully stabilized." It was a generous suggestion from a woman who might have felt threatened by another caregiver's success where her own efforts had failed. But Mrs. Henderson was a professional first, and Isabella's took precedence over any personal considerations. Considered the suggestion seriously. Its regular duties involved cleaning, laundry, and some meal preparation for the household staff. Expanding her role to include would require restructuring her responsibilities and likely increasing her compensation significantly. Said, approaching the rocking chair where continued to feed Isabella, "Would you be interested in taking on additional responsibilities with Isabella's care? I know it's different from what we originally hired you to do, but you seem to have a special connection with her." Looked down at Isabella, who was drinking steadily while maintaining eye contact. The child's face had already regained some color, and her tiny hands gripped the bottle with renewed strength. The transformation in less than 24 hours was remarkable. "I would be honored to help care for Isabella," said honestly. "But I need to consider my own son's needs too. Carlos is only 6 months old, and I don't want to take on responsibilities that would prevent me from being a good mother to him." It was a thoughtful response that showed priorities were clear and appropriate. Appreciated her honesty rather than an eager acceptance that might have hidden practical problems. "What if we adjusted your schedule?" suggested. "You could work with Isabella during the day and return home to Carlos each evening. We could also increase your hourly rate to reflect the additional responsibilities." Continued rocking Isabella while considering the proposal. The additional income would help her family significantly. She could save more money for Carlos's future, perhaps even begin setting aside funds for his education. But the decision involved more than just financial considerations. Caring for Isabella would mean forming a deeper emotional connection with the Blackwood family. Had always maintained professional boundaries with her employers, treating her job as work rather than personal involvement. Taking responsibility for a child's daily care would change that dynamic completely. "Could I start gradually?" asked. "Perhaps taking responsibility for Isabella's feeding schedule while Mrs. Henderson handles other aspects of her care. That way we can see how it works for everyone involved." Agreed immediately. The priority was ensuring Isabella continued to eat and regain her strength. The specific division of responsibilities could be worked out over time. Doctor returned that afternoon for a follow-up visit. She found Isabella alert and responsive, having consumed appropriate amounts of formula throughout the morning and early afternoon. The child's energy level had improved dramatically, and she was beginning to show interest in her surroundings again. "This is remarkable progress," Doctor said, examining Isabella thoroughly. "Her hydration is much improved, and she's already beginning to regain lost weight. Whatever approach you've been using, continue it exactly." Explained success with feeding Isabella. Doctor listened with professional interest, making notes about the techniques had employed. The key factors seemed to be the elimination of anxiety around feeding time and the introduction of a caregiver who approached the situation without the emotional charge that had built up around eating, Doctor observed. Calm demeanor and different techniques broke the negative cycle that had developed. Doctor spoke privately with about feeding schedules and techniques to maintain Isabella's progress. Listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about nutrition requirements and signs to watch for that might indicate problems. You have excellent instincts, Doctor told. Have you considered formal training in or early childhood development? The question surprised. She had never thought about her interactions with children as anything more than natural maternal responses. But Doctor's suggestion planted a seed of possibility that found intriguing. Over the following days, Isabella's condition continued to improve under care. The child's eating schedule normalized, her weight increased steadily, and her personality began to emerge more fully. She smiled frequently, babbled happily during feeding times, and showed appropriate curiosity about her environment. Found herself looking forward to her time with Isabella each day. The child was responsive and affectionate, reaching for when she entered the room and calming quickly when picked her up. Their bond deepened naturally as they spent more time together. Watched this developing relationship with mixed emotions. She was deeply grateful for success where everyone else had failed, but she also felt a complicated sense of loss. Seemed to understand Isabella's needs intuitively in ways that struggled to match. I sometimes wonder if I'm not a natural mother, confided to Richard one evening as they sat in their bedroom suite. Makes it look so easy with Isabella. She knows exactly when Isabella is hungry, when she's tired, when she needs comfort. I feel like I'm always guessing. Richard set aside the business papers he had been reviewing and gave his full attention to his wife's concerns. You're learning too. Isabella is your first child, and the feeding crisis happened when she was still very young. Has experience with her own son and perhaps a different perspective because she's not carrying the same emotional weight we are. Knew Richard was right, but the feelings of inadequacy persisted. She had excelled in every other area of her life, education, career, social situations. She had expected motherhood to be another skill she could master through effort and determination. The reality was proving more complex. Maybe I should spend more time observing techniques, said. Learn from what she's doing successfully. Richard nodded encouragingly. That sounds like a wise approach. And remember, Isabella is healthy and thriving now. That's what matters most. Began spending more time in the nursery, watching interactions with Isabella and gradually participating more in feeding times. Was generous in sharing her observations about Isabella's preferences and patterns, helping understand her daughter's signals better. Isabella likes when you talk to her during feeding, explained during one afternoon session. She watches your face very carefully. I think she's learning to recognize emotions and responds better when she sees calm, happy expressions. Practiced maintaining relaxed facial expressions during feeding times, consciously releasing the tension and worry that had built up during Isabella's crisis. Gradually, she found that Isabella responded more positively to her as well. Also shared practical techniques she had learned with Carlos. Sometimes Bobbies eat better when they feel secure and supported. I hold Isabella slightly more upright than the books suggest because she seems to prefer that position. Every baby is different. These conversations helped develop her own confidence as a mother. Instead of following rigid rules from books and experts, she began to observe Isabella more carefully and respond to the child's individual preferences. Mrs. Henderson adapted well to the new arrangement. She focused on Isabella's developmental activities, playtime, and overall routine while handled feeding responsibilities. The collaboration worked smoothly, with both women prioritizing Isabella's needs above any territorial concerns. Has a gift with children, Mrs. Henderson told privately. I've worked with many families where multiple caregivers were involved. This approach is remarkably mature and professional. Valued Mrs. Henderson's assessment. The nanny's experience and judgment were excellent, and her positive view of contribution confirmed what was observing daily. As Isabella's health stabilized, the household routine began to normalize. Continued her regular cleaning and household duties in addition to feeding Isabella, managing both responsibilities efficiently. The Blackwood family gradually relaxed as the crisis atmosphere faded. Richard found himself observing work with new appreciation. He had always respected her as a diligent employee, but her role in resolving Isabella's crisis had elevated his opinion of her capabilities significantly. "I'd like to discuss your compensation and responsibilities formally," Richard said one afternoon, calling her into his study. "Your additional work with Isabella has been invaluable, and I want to ensure you're fairly compensated." Entered the study with some nervousness. She had worked for the Blackwood family long enough to know that Richard was fair but demanding in his business dealings. She wasn't sure what kind of arrangement he might propose. "Your hourly rate will increase by 40%, effective immediately," Richard began. "Additionally, we'll provide health insurance coverage for Carlos as well as yourself, and I'd like to establish an education fund for Carlos that will contribute to annually." The generosity of the offer overwhelmed. The salary increase alone would improve her family's financial situation dramatically. Health insurance for Carlos would eliminate one of her major ongoing worries, and an education fund represented opportunities for her son that she had hardly dared to imagine. "Mr. Blackwood, this is more than generous," said, struggling to maintain her composure. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Richard replied. "You saved my daughter's life. This doesn't begin to repay that debt." Richard also offered to provide formal training for if she was interested. "Doctor mentioned that you have natural instincts for. With proper training, you could qualify for positions with other families or even start your own business eventually." The suggestion opened possibilities had never considered. She had always thought of her work as temporary, something to support her family while Carlos was young. The idea that she might develop genuine career opportunities in was both exciting and daunting. "I would be very interested in training," said, "but I want to continue working with Isabella as long as she needs me." Richard assured her that any training would be arranged around her current responsibilities. Isabella's care remained the top priority for the entire household. That evening, called her mother in El Salvador to share the good news about her improved situation. Her mother listened with joy and pride as described the Blackwood family's generosity and the opportunities opening up for both and Carlos. "God has blessed you with a kind heart and wise hands," her mother said in Spanish. "When you help others with love, the universe returns that love to you." Believed her mother's words held truth. She had simply tried to help a child in need, using the same instincts she applied to caring for Carlos. The fact that her efforts had been so successful and so appreciated felt like an extraordinary gift. Isabella continued to thrive under care. The child's feeding schedule became completely normal, and she began reaching all her developmental milestones right on schedule. Her personality emerged as sweet and curious, with a particular fondness for music and gentle voices. Began incorporating more Spanish into Isabella's daily routine, singing lullabies and speaking to her in both languages. Encouraged this, believing that early exposure to multiple languages would benefit Isabella's development. "I love hearing sing to Isabella," told Richard one evening. "Isabella responds so positively to the Spanish songs, and it's beautiful to hear the language spoken with such warmth and love." Had taken several years of Spanish in school, but had never achieved fluency. Listening to speak naturally with Isabella inspired to consider resuming her language studies. Doctor visited monthly to monitor Isabella's continued progress. Each visit confirmed that the child was developing normally and showed no lasting effects from her feeding crisis. The doctor was consistently impressed with caregiving skills and the bond she had formed with Isabella. "This is one of the most positive outcomes I've seen in a case like this," Doctor told and Richard during a 6-month follow-up visit. "Isabella is not just healthy, she's thriving. Care has been exceptional." The doctor's continued praise reinforced what the Blackwood family already knew, had become an integral part of Isabella's life and development. What had begun as an emergency solution had evolved into an ideal long-term arrangement. His own confidence grew as she saw the positive results of her work with Isabella. She began reading books about child development and nutrition, expanding her knowledge to complement her natural instincts. The Blackwood family encouraged this education, providing books and resources. Found herself learning alongside. Their conversations about Isabella's development became opportunities to deepen her own understanding of motherhood and child care. Shared insights generously, never making feel inadequate for her initial struggles. "Every mother learns differently," told during one of their discussions. Some things come naturally, and others we have to study and practice. The important thing is that Isabella knows she's loved and cared for well. Appreciated wisdom and tact. Rather than competing for Isabella's affection, the two women had developed a collaborative relationship focused on the child's best interests. As Isabella approached her second birthday, her relationship with remained strong and loving. The child had learned to say, clearly, and would call for her when she wanted comfort or playtime. Had become not just a caregiver but a beloved figure in Isabella's daily life. Zoe's son Carlos was thriving as well. The improved financial situation allowed to provide better food, clothing, and educational opportunities for him. She was able to move to a larger apartment in a safer neighborhood and enroll Carlos in a high-quality program. The education fund Richard had established for Carlos was growing steadily. Contributed to it as well when possible, dreaming of the day when her son might attend college or pursue professional training. The opportunities that seemed impossible just months earlier were becoming realistic goals. And Richard often marveled at how dramatically their lives had changed since intervention with Isabella. What had begun as a crisis that threatened their daughter's life had evolved into an arrangement that benefited everyone involved. "Sometimes I think was meant to be part of our family," said to Richard one evening as they watched play with Isabella in the garden. "Not just as an employee, but as someone who truly belongs in our lives." Richard nodded, watching patiently teach Isabella to identify flowers and butterflies. "She's made us all better as parents, as employers, as people. We're lucky to have her." The garden scene before them captured the peace and harmony. Their 2 years had passed since first fed Isabella that desperate night, and the Blackwood mansion had become a place of joy and laughter. Isabella, now 3.5 years old, was a bright, bilingual child who spoke English with her parents and Spanish with, switching between languages effortlessly as she played and explored her world. Its role in the household had evolved far beyond anyone's initial expectations. She had completed a certified training program that Richard funded, earning credentials in early childhood development and pediatric first aid. Her natural abilities, combined with formal education, had transformed her into a highly skilled professional. The relationship between and Isabella had deepened into something truly special. Isabella would wake each morning calling before anyone else, eager to share her dreams and plans for the day. Had become the child's primary source of comfort, learning, and daily guidance, while and Richard remained her beloved parents and family anchors. Had initially worried about feeling displaced in her daughter's affections, but she had come to appreciate the gift of presence in their lives. Instead of competing for Isabella's love, the adults in the household had learned to work together, each contributing unique strengths to the child's development. "Teaches Isabella things I never could," told her sister during a phone conversation one autumn evening. "She knows songs and games from her culture. She understands children's emotional needs intuitively, and she has endless patience for Isabella's questions and curiosity." Had also grown as a mother through observing techniques and philosophy. She had learned to be more present during her time with Isabella, more attuned to the child's subtle signals and needs. Their relationship had developed into something warm and secure, enhanced rather than threatened by presence. Isabella's personality had blossomed under nurturing care. She was confident and articulate, eager to learn new things and generous in sharing affection with everyone around her. She showed remarkable emotional intelligence for her age, comforting other children when they were sad and sharing her toys without being prompted. Zoe's life had been transformed by her expanded role with the Blackwood family. Her son Carlos, now 2.5, was developing into a bright, healthy child with opportunities had never imagined possible. The education fund Richard had established was growing steadily and had been able to enroll Carlos in an excellent preschool program. The Blackwood family had also helped move to a beautiful apartment in a family-friendly neighborhood. The 2-bedroom unit had a small garden where Carlos could play safely, and the school system in the area was excellent. His mother had visited from El Salvador and been amazed at the comfortable life her daughter had built in America. "You have been blessed beyond measure," his mother had said during her visit. "But more importantly, you have blessed others. Isabella loves you like family, and you have given her gifts that money cannot buy." His relationship with Isabella went beyond typical caregiver duties. She was teaching the child about kindness, empathy, and the value of treating all people with respect regardless of their circumstances. Isabella was learning Spanish naturally, but she was also absorbing values and worldview. The child showed unusual awareness of social differences for her age. When they visited parks or community events, Isabella would notice children who seemed lonely or left out and would invite them to play. Encouraged this inclusive behavior, helping Isabella understand that kindness was more important than material possessions. Richard had been particularly impressed with Isabella's development. His own childhood had been privileged but emotionally distant, with caregivers who were professional but not personally invested. Watching's loving relationship with his daughter had shown him what true could look like. "Isabella is growing up with advantages I never had," Richard told one evening as they watched help Isabella with a puzzle. "Not just financial advantages, but emotional ones. She's learning that people who work in service roles are worthy of love and respect. That's going to shape her character profoundly." Agreed completely. Isabella showed no signs of developing the entitled attitudes that sometimes affected wealthy children. She was polite to all the household staff, grateful for help she received, and naturally generous with others. This influence was evident in every aspect of the child's behavior. Mrs. Henderson had gracefully transitioned into a different role as Isabella grew older. She now focused on educational activities, creative projects, and preparing Isabella for eventual enrollment in preschool. Her relationship remained collaborative and friendly, with both women prioritizing Isabella's needs above any personal considerations. "Has a gift for making children feel secure and loved," Mrs. Henderson told during one of their planning sessions. "Isabella's emotional intelligence is remarkable for her age. She processes feelings well and communicates clearly about her needs. That's largely due to patient guidance." The entire household had benefited from presence and approach to life. She brought a warmth and authenticity that enriched everyone's daily experience. The mansion felt more like a true home rather than just a luxurious building. Its own professional development continued as well. She attended workshops and seminars about child development, building relationships with other professionals, and expanding her knowledge constantly. Richard supported these efforts completely, understanding that growth benefited Isabella directly. Doctor continued to visit occasionally, monitoring Isabella's development and marveling at the positive outcomes from what had begun as a serious medical crisis. The child showed no lasting effects from her early feeding difficulties and was thriving in every measurable way. "This is exactly what we hope to achieve in pediatric care," Doctor told during one visit. "Isabella is not just physically healthy, she's emotionally secure, intellectually curious, and socially well-adjusted. Your influence has been remarkable." Accepted such praise graciously, but remained focused on Isabella's ongoing needs rather than past accomplishments. She understood that child development was an ongoing process requiring constant attention and adaptation. As Isabella approached her 4th birthday, new challenges and opportunities arose. The child was ready for more structured educational activities and social interactions with peers her own age, and began researching preschool programs that would continue Isabella's bilingual education while providing appropriate academic challenges. Isabella expressed excitement about the prospect of attending school, but also concern about spending less time with. The child had never been separated from for extended periods, and the transition would require careful management. "Will come to school with me?" Isabella asked one morning as they discussed preschool plans. Explained that would not attend school with her, but that would still be part of her daily life. "We'll be here when you come home from school, and you can tell her everything you learned and did during the day." Help prepare Isabella for this transition by gradually introducing longer periods of independent play and activities with Richard. She also arranged with other children, helping Isabella develop friendships and social skills that would serve her well in group settings. "Change is part of growing up," explained to Isabella during one of their conversations. "When you go to school, you'll learn new things and meet new friends, but the people who love you will always be here when you come home." Isabella accepted this explanation with the resilience had helped her develop. The child had learned to trust that the important people in her life were reliable, and that changes usually brought new opportunities rather than losses. And Richard decided to include in the preschool selection process. Her insights about Isabella's learning style and social needs would be valuable in choosing the best program. They visited several schools together, observing classrooms and meeting teachers. "I want Isabella to attend a program that values diversity and inclusion," told the parents during one school visit. "She's been raised to appreciate different cultures and languages. I'd like her to continue developing that perspective." They ultimately chose a progressive preschool that emphasized social-emotional learning alongside academic preparation. The program included Spanish instruction, which would complement Isabella's bilingual development, and focused on building character and empathy in addition to traditional academic skills. Worked with Isabella throughout the summer before preschool began, helping her develop independent skills and confidence in new situations. They practiced activities like following multi-step instructions, sharing materials with other children, and expressing needs and feelings clearly to adults. Isabella's fourth birthday party reflected the unique character of their household. The guest list included children from various backgrounds and helped plan activities that celebrated both American and Latin American traditions. Isabella insisted that be included in all the party preparations and celebrations. "Is part of our family," Isabella declared when asked about party planning. "She has to help with my birthday because she makes everything more fun." The party was a wonderful success, with children playing traditional games taught them alongside more familiar activities. Isabella moved confidently between English and Spanish as she interacted with guests, demonstrating the linguistic abilities had helped her develop. Several parents commented on Isabella's mature social skills and inclusive behavior. She made sure every child felt included in activities and showed unusual sensitivity to others' feelings. Her character development was clearly ahead of typical expectations for her age. Felt proud watching Isabella navigate social situations with kindness and confidence. The child had internalized the values considered most important, treating others with respect, sharing generously, and showing empathy for those who seemed left out or different. And Richard also felt immense satisfaction watching their daughter's birthday celebration. Isabella had grown into exactly the kind of person they had hoped to raise: intelligent, kind, confident, and inclusive. His influence was evident in every positive aspect of the child's character. As summer drew to a close and preschool approached, the household began adjusting routines to accommodate Isabella's new schedule. Would continue her full-time position, but her daily responsibilities would shift to include more educational support and after-school care. "I'm excited to help Isabella with her school projects and homework," told as they planned the fall schedule. "I think she's going to love learning new things and making friends." Isabella showed appropriate nervousness about starting school, but she was generally excited about the new adventure. Had prepared her well for the transition, and the child felt confident about her ability to succeed in the new environment. The night before Isabella's first day of preschool helped her prepare by laying out clothes, organizing her new backpack, and talking through what the day would involve. Isabella listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about teachers, classmates, and school activities. "Will you think about me while I'm at school?" Isabella asked as tucked her into bed. "I'll think about you every minute," promised, smoothing Isabella's hair gently. "And when you come home, I want to hear about everything you did and learned." Isabella fell asleep peacefully, secure in the knowledge that would be waiting for her when school ended. The foundation of trust and love they had built over more than 3 years provided the stability Isabella needed to embrace new challenges confidently. And Richard sat in their living room that evening, reflecting on how dramatically their lives had changed since arrival in their family. What had begun as an employment relationship had evolved into something much deeper and more meaningful. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if hadn't been here that night when Isabella was refusing to eat," said quietly. "I can't imagine how different our lives might be." Richard nodded soberly. "Didn't just save Isabella's life that night. She taught us how to be a real family. She showed us what love and dedication look like in practice." They watched through the window as walked through the garden, checking on the flowers she and Isabella had planted together. In the morning, those flowers would still be blooming when Isabella returned from her first day of school, continuing the cycle of growth and beauty that had brought to their family's life. The preschool transition marked a new chapter in their story, but the foundation had built with Isabella would continue to support the child's development. The values, confidence, and love had provided would travel with Isabella wherever she went, shaping her interactions and character for years to come. His own future was bright with possibilities. Her credentials, combined with the glowing references the Blackwood family would provide, opened doors to expanded career opportunities. But for now, she was content to continue nurturing Isabella while exploring new ways to contribute to the child's development. The household had achieved a harmony that felt both natural and precious. Each person contributed unique gifts to Isabella's upbringing, creating an environment where the child could thrive emotionally, intellectually, and socially. It was a testament to what could be accomplished when people from different backgrounds worked together with shared love and commitment. Isabella's first day of preschool arrived with September sunshine streaming through the mansion's tall windows. Had been awake since 5 in the morning, preparing a special breakfast and organizing everything Isabella would need for her new adventure. The child had awakened excited but slightly nervous, clinging to longer than usual during their morning routine. And Richard had both cleared their schedules to take Isabella to school, understanding the significance of this milestone, would accompany them, providing familiar comfort during the transition. Isabella had insisted that help her choose her outfit the night before, a bright yellow dress that it said would make her look like sunshine. "Do I look ready for school?" Isabella asked, spinning around in her dress while finished braiding her hair with colorful ribbons. "You look perfect, me," replied, securing the braids with gentle care. "You look smart and kind and ready to learn wonderful new things." The drive to Sunshine Academy took 15 minutes through tree-lined streets. Isabella sat between and in the back seat, alternately chattering with excitement and falling into thoughtful silence. Held her hand whenever the child seemed anxious, providing steady reassurance. Sunshine Academy was a beautiful school with bright classrooms, creative play areas, and gardens where children could explore nature. The teachers were warm and welcoming, and the diverse student body reflected the inclusive environment and Richard had sought for their daughter. Ms. Isabella's teacher greeted them at the classroom door. She was a young woman with kind eyes and an easy smile who spoke fluent Spanish as well as English. Isabella perked up immediately when Ms. said, and began a conversation in Spanish about Isabella's favorite colors and activities. "I can tell Isabella is going to do wonderful here," Ms. told quietly while Isabella explored the classroom. "Her language skills are exceptional for her age, and she seems very confident socially." Felt proud watching Isabella interact naturally with her new classmates. The child introduced herself to other children, complimented a girl on her colorful backpack, and offered to help a boy who seemed confused about where to hang his jacket. Teachings about kindness and inclusion were clearly internalized. When it came time for parents and caregivers to leave, Isabella hugged each adult goodbye with appropriate emotion but no excessive clinging. She had learned to trust that separations were temporary and that the people she loved would return as promised. "I'll see you this afternoon," Isabella said, giving her an extra-long hug. "I'm going to remember everything so I can tell you all about it." His heart swelled with pride and love. "I'll be thinking about you all day, learn lots of wonderful things." And Richard were amazed at how smoothly the transition went. They had expected tears or resistance, but Isabella's emotional security allowed her to embrace the new experience with confidence. His patient preparation had given the child exactly what she needed to succeed. On the drive home, sat quietly in the passenger seat while Richard drove and looked out the window. All three adults were processing the significance of this moment. Isabella was growing up and becoming more independent, but their love and support would continue to guide her development. "I want to discuss something with you," Richard said as they pulled into the mansion's driveway. "And I have been talking about your future and Isabella's ongoing needs." Felt a flutter of concern. Changes in household arrangements could affect her income and stability, and she needed to consider Carlos's needs as well as her own professional development. "We'd like to offer you a permanent position as Isabella's educational coordinator and family liaison," Richard continued. "It would involve working with Isabella's teachers, managing her educational development, and continuing the cultural and language instruction you've been providing." Turn to face from the front seat. "We want to formalize your role and ensure you have job security and professional recognition for the incredible work you've been doing." was speechless for a moment. A formal position with an official title represented career advancement she had never imagined possible. It would also provide the stability and recognition her professional development deserved. The compensation would be significantly higher than your current salary, Richard explained. And we'd provide full benefits for both you and Carlos, plus continued contributions to his education fund. His mind raced as she considered the offer. It represented financial security for her family and recognition of her professional abilities. But it also meant committing to the Blackwood family long-term and potentially limiting other career opportunities. "Could I have some time to think about it?" asked. "It's a wonderful offer, and I'm honored that you value my work so highly, but I want to consider all the implications carefully." And Richard assured her that there was no pressure to decide quickly. They wanted to make the choice that felt right for her and her family. That afternoon waited eagerly for Isabella's return from school. When the carpool van pulled up to the mansion, Isabella bounded out with a huge smile and immediately began chattering about her first day. "We learned a song about counting in Spanish, and I already knew it," Isabella exclaimed, launching into an animated description of her day. "And there's a girl named Maria who speaks Spanish too, and we're going to be friends." Listened with delight as Isabella shared every detail of her school experience. The child had clearly thrived in the new environment, making friends easily and participating enthusiastically in all activities. Her teachers had sent home a note praising her social skills and academic readiness. "Ms. said I could teach the class some of the songs you taught me," Isabella continued excitedly. "Can we practice tonight so I remember all the words perfectly?" Agreed immediately, thrilled that Isabella wanted to share the cultural heritage had been passing on to her. That evening, they spent time rehearsing traditional Spanish children's songs that Isabella could teach her classmates. Joined their practice session, listening as and Isabella sang together in perfect harmony. The sound filled the mansion with joy and warmth, representing the beautiful blending of cultures that had enriched all their lives. As weeks passed, Isabella's confidence at school continued to grow. She was becoming a leader among her classmates, often helping other children with tasks and mediating minor disputes with wisdom beyond her years. Her teachers were consistently impressed with her maturity and kindness. Attended parent-teacher conferences alongside and Richard, providing insights about Isabella's learning style and home environment that helped teachers understand the child's exceptional development. Her professional knowledge, combined with her intimate understanding of Isabella's personality, made her a valuable educational partner. "Isabella is reading at a first-grade level and doing math concepts typically taught to older children," Ms. reported during one conference. "But more importantly, she shows remarkable emotional intelligence and leadership qualities." Beamed with pride at these reports, but remained focused on Isabella's continued growth, rather than dwelling on past accomplishments. She worked with Isabella's teachers to ensure the child was appropriately challenged academically, while continuing to develop socially and emotionally. Isabella's bilingual abilities were becoming particularly impressive. She could switch between English and Spanish effortlessly, often serving as a translator for classmates who spoke only one language. Her teachers recognized this as a valuable gift that would serve Isabella well throughout her life. At home, Isabella's relationship with remained as close and loving as ever. School had not diminished their bond. Instead, it had given them new topics to explore together. Helped Isabella with homework, but they also continued their cultural activities and creative play. Carlos, now attending the excellent preschool program could afford thanks to her improved income, was developing into a bright, articulate child himself. The two boys had become friends during occasional visits to the mansion with Carlos, and Isabella treated him like a beloved younger brother. "Can Carlos come to my next birthday party?" Isabella asked one afternoon as they worked on a school project together. "I want all my favorite people to be there." His heart warmed at Isabella's inclusion of her son. The child saw Carlos as part of her extended family, which reflected the values had taught her about treating others with love and acceptance. And Richard were also developing a relationship with Carlos, understanding that he was important to and therefore deserving of their care and attention. They included him in some family activities and always asked about his development and well-being. The mansion had truly become a place where different cultures and backgrounds blended harmoniously. Isabella was growing up with an appreciation for diversity that would shape her worldview permanently. She was learning that love and family could take many forms, and that kindness was more important than material wealth. His decision about the formal position offer became clearer as she observed Isabella's continued growth and development. The child still needed guidance and cultural instruction, and found deep satisfaction in being part of Isabella's educational journey. "I'd like to accept your offer," told Richard, and during a family meeting in November. "I love working with Isabella, and I believe I can contribute significantly to her continued development." And Richard were delighted with his decision. They immediately began making arrangements for his new role, including office space where she could coordinate with Isabella's teachers and plan educational activities. His new position came with increased responsibilities, but also greater autonomy and professional recognition. She would work directly with Isabella's school to ensure continuity between home and classroom learning, and she would continue providing cultural education and language instruction. The formal arrangement also included provisions for his own professional development. Richard, and committed to supporting his pursuit of additional certifications in early childhood education, understanding that her growth would benefit Isabella directly. Isabella was thrilled when she learned that would be taking on a bigger role in her education. "Does this mean we'll be my teacher at home too?" she asked excitedly. Explained that would continue helping with homework and learning activities while also working with Isabella's school teachers. "We'll make sure everything you learn at school connects with everything you learn at home." The child was delighted with this arrangement. Had always been her favorite teacher for songs, games, and cultural activities. Having his involvement in her formal education felt natural and exciting to Isabella. As Isabella's 4th birthday approached, the family planned a celebration that reflected her growing maturity and expanding social circle. The guest list included classmates from school as well as family friends, creating opportunities for Isabella to practice her hosting skills. Helped Isabella plan activities that would entertain children from various backgrounds, incorporating games and traditions from different cultures. Isabella was excited to share his heritage with her new friends while also learning about their family's traditions. The birthday party was a wonderful success, with children playing happily together while adults marveled at Isabella's poise and inclusiveness. She made sure every child felt included and special, demonstrating the values had instilled in her from early childhood. Several parents commented on Isabella's exceptional social skills and maturity. They asked and Richard about their approach to raising such a thoughtful, confident child, was quick to credit its influence and guidance. "Has taught Isabella that kindness and empathy are the most important qualities a person can have," explained to curious parents. "Isabella has learned to see the best in everyone and to treat all people with respect." Watched the party with quiet satisfaction, seeing the positive impact of her teachings reflected in Isabella's behavior. The child was growing into exactly the kind of person it hoped to help shape: intelligent, kind, confident, and inclusive. As winter arrived and Isabella settled into her school routine, the household had achieved a new equilibrium. Its expanded role provided professional satisfaction while allowing her to continue nurturing the child she loved. And Richard had gained not just a highly skilled employee, but a true partner in raising their daughter. Isabella was thriving academically, socially, and emotionally. Her bilingual abilities, cultural awareness, and emotional intelligence set her apart from her peers in the best possible ways. She was becoming a leader and role model among children her age. His own life had been transformed beyond anything she could have imagined when she first started working for the Blackwood family. Her career prospects were bright, her financial security was established, and her relationship with Isabella provided daily joy and fulfillment. The mansion that had once felt formal and imposing had become a true home filled with laughter, learning, and love. Different cultures, languages, and backgrounds had blended together to create an environment where everyone could thrive. Most importantly, Isabella was growing up with values and perspectives that would guide her throughout life. She understood that worth was measured by character rather than wealth, that diversity was a gift to be celebrated, and that love could create family bonds stronger than traditional blood relationships. Had given Isabella far more than She had provided a foundation of love, wisdom, and cultural richness that would shape the child's entire future. In return, Isabella had given opportunities for growth, recognition, and professional advancement that had transformed her own life and her son's prospects. 5 years had passed since that desperate night when Isabella refused to eat, and the Blackwood family had grown and changed in ways none of them could have predicted. Isabella was now 8 years old, a confident and accomplished third grader who spoke 3 languages fluently, and had become something of a local celebrity for her cultural awareness and community involvement. His role in the household had evolved far beyond anyone's original expectations. She now held the official title of Director of Cultural Education and Family Development, a position Richard had created specifically to recognize her unique contributions to Isabella's upbringing and to formalize her growing influence within their extended family structure. The Blackwood mansion had been transformed from a showcase of wealth into a vibrant center of cultural exchange and learning, had helped establish a small library of books in multiple languages, a music room where Isabella practiced traditional instruments from various cultures, and an art studio where the child explored different artistic traditions from around the world. Isabella's academic achievements were remarkable, but what truly set her apart was her character and social consciousness. She had organized fundraising drives at school for children in need, started a multicultural club that celebrated different heritages, and regularly volunteered at local community centers serving immigrant families. Isabella has inherited the best qualities from both her biological family and her chosen family, her current teacher, Mrs. told during a parent conference. She has the confidence and resources of privilege, but she also has the empathy and cultural awareness that comes from being raised by someone who truly understands diversity. His influence on Isabella was evident in every aspect of the child's development. Isabella moved seamlessly between English, Spanish, and the French she was learning at school. She could discuss her family's business ventures with understanding while also talking knowledgeably about the challenges faced by working families like extended relatives. And Richard often marveled at the young woman their daughter was becoming. Isabella showed none of the entitlement or social blindness that sometimes affected wealthy children. Instead, she demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of social justice and a genuine desire to use her advantages to help others. "I want to be like when I grow up," Isabella had declared during a recent family dinner. "She helps people and makes their lives better. That's more important than just making money." Richard had exchanged a meaningful look with across the dinner table. Their daughter's value system reflected its influence more than their own backgrounds, and they were grateful for the moral foundation had provided. His own life had been transformed beyond recognition. She had completed a bachelor's degree in early childhood development through evening and weekend classes, with the Blackwood family covering all expenses and providing schedule flexibility. Her professional credentials now qualified her for positions at top private schools or educational consulting firms. Carlos, now 7 years old, was thriving in an excellent elementary school and showed every sign of inheriting his mother's intelligence and kindness. The education fund Richard had established for him had grown substantially, ensuring that Carlos would have opportunities had never dreamed possible for her son. His extended family had also benefited from her success with the Blackwoods. She had been able to help several relatives immigrate to the United States, providing financial support and connections that smoothed their transition to American life. The ripple effects of his position had touched dozens of lives. The relationship between and the Blackwood family had evolved into something that transcended traditional employment categories, was considered family by everyone who knew them, and her input was sought on all major decisions affecting Isabella's development and education. Isabella's 8th birthday party reflected the unique character of their blended family. The celebration included children and families from school, its extended family, the Blackwood's social circle, and community members and Isabella had met through their volunteer work. The diversity of guests created a rich tapestry of languages, traditions, and perspectives. "This is what America should look like," commented Doctor, who had remained a family friend long after her professional services were no longer needed. Different backgrounds, different economic situations, but everyone coming together to celebrate a child's growth and development. Isabella moved gracefully through the crowd of guests, equally comfortable chatting with her parents' business associates and playing games with children from the neighborhood. She served as a natural bridge between different groups, helping people find common ground and shared interests. Watch the party with quiet pride, seeing the culmination of years of careful guidance and teaching. Isabella embodied everything it hoped to instill: confidence without arrogance, cultural awareness without tokenism, and genuine kindness that extended to everyone she encountered. Approached during a quiet moment in the party preparations. "I've been thinking about something, and I'd like to discuss it with you privately." They stepped into Richard's study, away from the celebration noise. His expression was serious but not concerning, and waited attentively to hear what was on her mind. "Richard and I have been talking about making some legal arrangements," began carefully. "We'd like to ensure that if anything ever happens to us, Isabella's care and education would continue in the hands of someone who truly understands her needs and values." His heart began to beat faster as she realized where this conversation was heading. "We'd like to ask if you would consider becoming Isabella's legal guardian in the event that Richard and I are unable to care for her," continued. "Obviously, financial arrangements would be made to ensure you could provide for both Isabella and Carlos without hardship." The request overwhelmed with a mixture of honor and responsibility. Being asked to potentially raise Isabella spoke to the depth of trust and respect the Blackwood family had developed for her over the years. "I'm deeply honored by your confidence in me," replied carefully. "But this is a decision that would affect Carlos as well, and I would need time to consider all the implications." Assured that there was no pressure to decide immediately. "We wanted you to know how much we trust and value you. Whatever you decide, we'll always be grateful for everything you've given our family." As the party continued around them, contemplated the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From a night of desperate feeding attempts to being asked to potentially raise a millionaire's daughter, the transformation still seemed almost impossible to believe. Isabella's academic performance continued to excel throughout third grade. She was reading at a middle school level, excelling in mathematics, and showing particular talent for languages and cultural studies. Her teachers consistently praised her leadership abilities and her kindness toward classmates who struggled academically or socially. Worked closely with Isabella's school to ensure the child was appropriately challenged, while maintaining the social-emotional development that was equally important. They had found ways to provide advanced academic work without isolating Isabella from her age-appropriate peer group. "Isabella is the kind of student every teacher hopes to have," her principal told during a meeting about Isabella's academic trajectory. "She's academically gifted, but more importantly, she makes everyone around her better. Her classmates try harder because Isabella encourages them and helps them feel capable." Felt immense satisfaction hearing such reports. Academic achievement was important, but Isabella's positive influence on others reflected the values considered most crucial for the child's development. At home, Isabella continued to serve as a bridge between different worlds. She helped translate documents for relatives who were still learning English, taught traditional songs to children at community events, and regularly asked thoughtful questions about social justice and inequality. "Why do some children not have enough food when other families have so much?" Isabella asked one evening as they prepared care packages for a local food bank. Appreciated Isabella's direct questions about difficult topics. "That's one of the things that isn't fair about the world, me. That's why people who have been blessed with advantages have a responsibility to help others who haven't been as fortunate." These conversations shaped Isabella's understanding of her place in the world. She was learning that privilege came with responsibility, and that her advantages should be used to benefit others rather than simply to make her own life easier. Richard and often listened to these discussions from adjacent rooms, marveling at its ability to address complex social issues in age-appropriate ways. Isabella was developing a sophisticated understanding of social justice that would guide her choices throughout life. As Isabella's 8th year progressed, the family faced new decisions about her education. Several prestigious private schools had approached them about enrolling Isabella, recognizing her exceptional abilities and the positive publicity her multicultural background might bring to their institutions. Participated in all school visits and interviews, providing insights about Isabella's learning style and social needs. Her professional credentials and intimate knowledge of Isabella's development made her an invaluable part of the decision-making process. I want Isabella to continue attending schools that value diversity and social consciousness, told and Richard during one planning session. She's learning that education should serve a purpose beyond personal advancement. They ultimately chose a progressive private school that emphasized global citizenship and community service alongside academic excellence. The school's mission aligned perfectly with the values had instilled in Isabella. Isabella's transition to the new school went smoothly, thanks largely to the confidence and social skills had helped her develop. She made friends quickly, impressed teachers with her academic abilities, and immediately began looking for ways to contribute to the school community. Isabella started a lunch program for students whose families are struggling financially, her new teacher reported to and after just 2 months. She organized fundraising and convinced the cafeteria staff to participate. The bond between them would last a lifetime, representing the beautiful possibilities that could emerge when people from different backgrounds came together with open hearts and shared commitment to each other's. As completed her evening tasks and prepared to go home to Carlos, she felt grateful for the journey that had brought her to this point. What had started as a job had become a calling, and what had begun as caregiving had evolved into genuine family bonds that would last a lifetime. Dee had achieved. Isabella laughed delightedly as pointed out different insects and plants, her young mind absorbing everything with eager curiosity. It was a perfect moment of childhood joy, made possible by the love and dedication of a woman who had transformed their family's life through simple compassion and skill. "Let me call my neighbor again," said. "If Mrs. can keep Carlos overnight, I'll stay and help however I can."